Welcome to Byte and Beyond with Uday. Hi everyone. So in this video we will learn how to create or expose REST APIs using Spring Boot. So as you know, in my previous video I have taught you how to create a Spring Boot application. In this video I will cover how we can expose REST APIs. So if you don't know how to create a Spring Boot application, you can check out my previous video. You can see the I button somewhere on the screen. Please click on it and watch that video. And if you already know how to create a Spring Boot application, then you can uh, start along with me. So let me go to my IDE. So this is my IDE. So in my last video, I have created a simple Spring Boot application which only contains the main class, okay, and nothing else. So now I want to expose REST APIs. So I need additional dependency, which is Spring Web. So let me go to the pom.xml and see. You can see I don't have the Spring Web dependency over here. So let's go to the Spring IO website and add that Spring Web dependency in the pom.xml. So in order to make Spring Boot application as a web application, we need Spring Web dependency. Okay, by default, when you create a Spring Boot application, it is not a web application. It is simple Spring Boot application. In order to make your application as a web application, you need to add Spring Web dependency in your pom.xml. So let's go to the Spring IO website, type Spring IO, go to the initializer. Okay, you already know how to fill this detail. Okay, if you don't have any existing project. So here we need Spring Web dependency. So simply type Spring Web. You can see we have a first option over here, Spring Web. Click on it. Okay, now go to the Explore. Okay, scroll down. So you can see in the dependency section, we can find the Spring Web, Spring Boot Starter Web dependency. So let's copy this dependency from here and go to your IDE. Inside your IDE, just open pom.xml. You can see pom.xml is already open. Now remove this Spring Boot Starter. We don't need this. Copy this Spring Boot Starter Web dependency. Now our application, Spring Boot application, become a web application by just adding this web dependency. Okay, so now let me yeah, now let me sync my project first. It is synced. Now let me start. So the project is starting up. So you can see our web application is up and running on port 8080, and our web application running on Tomcat. So this Spring started web dependency includes the embedded Tomcat, and our this web application is running on the embedded Tomcat server itself. Okay, it has already the Spring Boot starter web dependency already have the embedded Tomcat server, and our application is running on it. So we don't need any additional server in order to start our web application. So you can see it is, you know, up and running on port 8080. Now let's try to access this web application. Now, as we know, the port is 8080 from the console. Just type, you can see white label error page because we don't have any endpoint which is exposed to access. Correct. So let's first expose one simple endpoint. Okay. Now close this unnecessary files. So now our task is to create one simple REST API. Okay. So yeah. So one thing I would like to mention over here is whenever you create your project name must be in the smaller case. You should not your package name should not use any special characters or the capital letters. Sometimes it is okay to use camel cases, but it is a good practice that the package name should only be in the smaller case. So you can see my package name is only in the smaller case. So just click on it and create another package which is controller. Okay. In order to expose the uh, REST API, we need a REST controller. So I'm creating one controller package over here. This is the controller package. Now click on it and just create a Java class, simple Java class. For example, test controller. For example, okay. Now, in order to make your class REST controller, you need an annotation which is REST controller, and you can create one endpoint over here. Let me disable my suggestion over here quickly. Disable code completion so it won't bother us. Yeah. So let's create one endpoint quickly. For example, public string hello. Okay. Uh, Hi there. Okay. And add a get mapping over here. This is enough. Let's restart our application. You can see the application is up and running on port 8080 again. Let's refresh this page. You can see the output high there. Okay. So we have exposed our first REST endpoint using Spring Web, but this is not a uh, good experience or a good example to learn how to expose the REST APIs. So let's use a real world example to create or expose the REST API. So I want to take take example of employee, and I will expose the APIs for the employee where you can create employee, where you can update employee, you can get the employee by ID, you can delete the employee by ID, and you can get all the employees at a one time. So I will expose the CRUD operation REST APIs or REST endpoints. So let's begin. So this is just for the example. This controller was just for the example. We don't need this. Just delete this one. Okay. So let's create one package which is entity. Entity is a simple Java object or Pojo. So I'm creating one package over here, entity. Let's give a name over here, employee. Okay, this is employee. And let's create some fields over here. For example, ID, and then we have another field which is first name, and then we have one more field which is last name. Now employee, we have earning employees, so let's create another field which is salary. Okay, and create a getter setter for all these fields. Okay, so you can simply right click and go to generate and then create a getter and setter. Select all the fields, getter and setter created. Additionally, you can create equals and hash code method. Okay, for the uniqueness, select ID for your equals and hash code method. So it is created. This is sufficient. So what we have done over here, we have created a simple class which is employee. Employee have employee class have few fields: ID, first name, last name, and salary. And we have created a getter setter and the equals and hash code method. Let's create constructor because we might need a constructor to create object with the with the fields. So I have created a constructor which accepts all the fields: ID, first name, last name, and salary. Okay. So this is so basically we are uh, creating or exposing REST endpoints for the real world example. Over here we are taking example of employee. Okay, and we have created a Pojo class for it. So before we start to create uh, create a REST APIs, let's understand the architecture or the layer of our application in order to create a REST endpoints or REST APIs. So let me go to the my presentation. So this is the architecture used by the most of the web application. Okay, so whenever you are developing a web application, usually there are three layers, and it is a best practice to create a three layer. The first one, the controller layer, where we expose our REST APIs. Okay, and second one is service layer, where we write our business logic, which is specific to our application. For in our case, uh, all the logic which is related to employee object. For example, add 10% increment to the current salary, or change name or last name for the employee, delete the employee. All the logic should be over here. Okay. So this contains the business logic, which is actual logic to our for our application domain, and this is the repository layer. So this layer is responsible to store our object to the DB database. So this layer has a responsibility to store our data to the database. Okay, and you can see the flow. The user is sending a request. It first goes to the controller layer, then controller layer access the service layer. Then we manipulate our object or make some changes in our object, in our case employee object, and then we send that object to the repository layer, and then repository layer stores that object or that data inside the database. Okay, then we get the response from the DB. Repository send that response to the service send that response to the controller, and finally it goes to the user. So that how the flow goes. Okay, so for the sake of the simplicity, our main objective for this video is to create a REST APIs or expose the REST APIs. So in this video, I will cover only this two layer, controller layer and the service layer. And we will use a dummy database, okay, which will store our employee object. I won't cover repository layer and DB layer in this case for the sake of the simplicity. First, let's learn how to expose the REST APIs. Then we will learn how to integrate our web application with the database and how to create a repo layer and all. So we will in this video we will cover these two layers, controller layer and the service layer. By covering these two layer, we have a clarity, and it will be easy for you to understand how to expose the REST APIs in order to add any additional complexity. Let's make it simple. First, learn how to expose the REST APIs. Okay, so let's begin. Let's start the actual development. Okay, so let's go to the IDE. You can see we have already created our employee object. Okay, and we have created constructor and getter setter for it. Okay, this is enough. For the simplicity, let's keep these four fields only. Now, yeah. Now let's create another package which is service layer. Okay, so we are creating a service layer over here. So let's first create a package service. Okay, the package is created. Okay, now let's create one interface which is employee service, because in service layer we create our services. So employee service. So let's create a employee service interface. Okay. Okay. Our employee service is created. Now let's declare few methods over here. For example, void employee. Okay. Then we have another method which is update employee. Okay. Okay. So this first method save will responsible to save the employee object to the database, our dummy database in this case. And this second method update, which is responsible to update the existing employee employee in the database, or in our case, dummy database. Okay. Now, sorry. Now declare another method which is find by ID. Okay. Find by ID, and we will expect over here ID type as long. Then create. So find by ID, it means we have a method which is responsible to find the employee by ID field. Okay, so if you are passing the ID 1, so it will give you the employee who has the ID 1. If you are passing 2, then it will return the employee with the ID 2. Okay, we have another method, delete, delete by ID. Okay, delete by ID, long, then ID. Okay, this method delete by ID is responsible to delete an employee from the database. Okay, now go to the not go to the let's create one more method which is responsible to fetch the all the employees from our storage. Okay, list employee, find all. Okay, the type is list, and we need all the employees over here. Okay, now, so if you are wondering why I have created a interface over here instead of actual class. So it is a good design to create an interface and then create a class which will implement this interface. So by doing that, we are separating the what and how we so in whenever you are creating an interface and if you are declaring all these methods, so you are declaring or you are mentioning or you are creating a contract over here that what should a particular service do. Okay, this is explaining or this is declaring what should employee service do. So employee service can save employee, employee service can update employee, it can find by ID, it can get the employee by ID or delete employee by ID and find all the employees. It cannot do any additional things. So we are declaring our contract over here and we are simply telling all the implementation, all the classes that you can do only these things. If you need to use employee service, you can do only these things. You can't, you can't save the department or you can't save the department object or you can't update the department object over here. This service is responsible for the employee only, and you should uh, you should implement this method, and you can do these things only. You can't do any additional things. Okay, so this is a good design which we follow in the Spring Boot web application. So create one class over here, employee service IMPL. Okay, IMPL, it means implementation. Okay, and this employee service, as I mentioned, will implement the employee service IMPL class will implement this employee service interface. So the what part, what employee service do is mentioned over here, and how we can achieve these things will be written over here inside the employee service IMPL. Okay, so let's click on override methods. Okay, let's override this all these methods. Okay, uh, okay. So you can see I have overridden all the methods over here. Now let's write actual logic for all this method, which will be responsible to, store our employee object. Okay. So in this case, we are not creating repository layer because for the simplicity, we are focusing on how to expose the REST APIs. So I will create a dummy database over here using map. Okay, private, static, final, and I am creating a map over here, which is responsible to store our employee object, employee, and let's give a name employee DB. This is static and final, so let's give appropriate no, name over here, employee DB. This is good, and create a linked hash map to maintain our insertion order. So this is our dummy database. This long is a ID of employee, and this is the actual object, actual employee object. Okay, this is you can think of this is primary key, and this is the actual record in the database. You can think like this. Okay, now let's create another field, which is what I can say. The type should be long, and the field name should be ID counters. So let me explain you why I'm creating this field. So you can see we are, employee object has, the ID field, which is ID of the employee, and in the map we are storing this ID to quickly find that particular employee by the ID itself. So as you know, we don't have any database. So I'm creating a simple ID counter, which will be used to create to generate a ID for our employee object. Okay. So let's create one dummy method for that. Okay. So let's come to the end and let's one create one let's create one static method. Okay, get next ID. Okay, and just return that ID counter. Just increment and return that ID counter. Okay, so we will use this method to generate a new ID for our employee object. So each time it will increase the ID number by one. By default, it is 0. So whenever we will store first employee, it will return the ID as 1. Second time, it will return 2, 3, 4, and so on. So this is the purpose of this method. Okay, you can ignore this method if you want to. This is just for the dummy database and not for the expose the REST API. So you can ignore if you want to. That is absolutely fine. But this is for the convenience. Now create another method which is you know uh, that will responsible to check the existing employee in the database. If the employee is not exist, we will throw the exception. In case our uh, data is not available in the data, for example, employee, let's say you are finding employee with the ID 10 and that employee is not present in the database. At that time you should throw a exception. Okay, so let's create one utility method. Okay, check employee exists. Wrong ID. Okay, this is sufficient. Now let's check over here. Employee DB dot you know exist. Yeah, I think the contain key. Okay. So if the ID is not available in our employee DB, it means that particular employee is not available in the database, and from here we will throw an exception. So Spring Boot provide response status exception in order to throw an exception from your web application, and the code, the status code, HTTP status code should be not found because employee is not available in the database. So we are sending the status as not found. So not found means 404. You can see the code is 404 and the response text is not found. Our employee is not found. That is why we are throwing an exception not found from here. This is the utility method which we will use. We won't be able to cover this topic in a single video. So let's create three parts. This is part one. I will create two more parts, part two and three. So see you in the next part. Till then, bye.